everyone, welcome back to Shadows of Progress. Today we're stepping into agriculture, one of the oldest systems in the world and also one of the most disrupted right now. On one side, you have drones, satellite dashboards, climate controlled farms, and on the other, millions of farmers still relying on intuition, monsoons, and land inherited across generations. My guest today is Deepak Malik, who runs a private equity fund focused on food and agriculture and sits right at the intersection of investment, innovation, and India's agricultural backbone. And we're not just talking about what's changing, we're talking about who's moving forward, who's getting stuck, and what do the shadows of progress look like in farming and agriculture. Thank you, Deepak, for joining me today.
Hi, Riya. Looking forward to speaking to you.
Yeah.
So you've raised your opening remarks are quite apt. The one thing that you should know that the food and the agriculture system now, both in Asia, which is obviously a very large part of the global population resides, is deeply interconnected, and the risks that shape it move seamlessly across borders and value chains. So this is very important for food and agriculture now. A disruption in one area can quickly ripple through supply chains, shift consumer trust, and alter market dynamics. So that is one big feature of agriculture and food now in versus what it used to be, let's say 50 or 60 years ago. Now the key issues and the key challenges we face are the following. Population is growing, land available for agriculture is limited. So in the West, predominantly Western Europe, even Eastern Europe now, in Russia and North America, and even now in Brazil and Argentina, there is huge technical advancements that have been made in terms of automation, seed improvements, large scale farms, which is not what you see in India or in some other poor countries of Southeast Asia. Do you want me to get into some of the challenges, or do you want to get into moving forward?
No, we can go into the challenges first. So, as you mentioned, like you've kind of covered different countries and how it's different in Asia. So, would you say that these like agricultural trends are converging across different countries, like specifically Asia versus the West?
Yeah, so now unfortunately, Asia, India, and some poor countries of Southeast Asia are still far behind in terms of the technical innovations that have been implemented in the West. So, yes, there is an attempt being made to improve the situation for agriculture and food in Asia or in India, namely, but it's still far behind.
So, how do you look at, as you mentioned, like we're kind of maybe pushing tech into agriculture, like in different countries, but the bigger issues still like remain, such as malnutrition or affordability, and kind of the same old human problems. So, how do you look at food security when the top of the chain is getting more high tech, but the bottom is still fighting for basics?
Yes, that is true. And so the goal, the issue is how does the bottom of the pyramid, with all the disadvantages, lack of technology, how do they and how do we encourage and promote sustainable food choices and processes? How do you also ensure that they have a soil that is clean, that they're dealing with clean water? Because a lot of the soil has actually got contaminated. So that is a big challenge. And we are looking at various, trying to find various solutions for the same, which entail, as I said, hydroponic, climate controlled agriculture, making sure that you have hybrid seeds, which have higher yields, less disease resistant, are also more can be grown in harsher climates. So there's a lot of push towards innovation in seeds. That is the basis of all agriculture, while also to protect against very harsh climate volatility. You're also looking at controlled agriculture. That means you have covered agriculture. But for row crops, which is all your rice, corn, soybean, wheat, predominantly, you cannot have, you know, hydroponics or controlled agriculture. There you have to have the right seed, enough irrigation, and you're hoping that the smallholder farmers can amalgamate their lands so that automation tractors can be used on those lands. But still a very big challenge. for the bottom of the pyramid.
Oh, so one aspect you mentioned was about the seeds, like especially how hybrid seeds may have boosted yields, but they've also locked farmers into buying new seeds every year. So, how do you think, like in this scenario, we would protect a farmer's independence while still embracing the scientific progress?
Yeah, very good point and very good question. And it's a very big challenge because with hybrid seeds, these are expensive seeds. The farmers are forced to buy these seeds every year or every year or every 2 years. The seed companies are very large behemoths. They spend billions of dollars in research and development. To give you an example, a new variety of seed, a new variety of hybrid seed takes 7 years of our research and development. So when they actually commercialize their seed, they're expecting returns. So the farmers have to pay up, and so this is a big challenge. I think what you can hope for is that the government, agricultural institutes, organizations should be working with the farmers, developing new seeds versus letting large companies monopolize, the new seeds, so that the governments of poor countries can help the farmers give seeds at subsidized rates, because that's the only thing you can at least hope for. Otherwise, the farmers will be at the mercy of very large seed companies.
Okay. So what you're saying is kind of getting on a smaller level, and rather than working with the larger companies, working with both the farmers and people who can create the and make the seeds.
Yeah, and I think the government, in the government, there are many. Indian government, for example, supports a large number of agricultural universities, agricultural associations, dairy development boards, fisheries, livestock. So all these agricultural research institutions that are funded by the government should come and support seed development so that cheap seeds are made available to the farmers.
Okay. So one other aspect or process that might look perfect is precision irrigation, because there's more water saved and more crop grown. But in practice, only the farmers with capital or good electricity can make it work. So in this case as well, how do we stop this from becoming something that helps the rich farms sprint ahead while everyone else stays stuck?
Yeah, no, very, very good point. Because as I said in the beginning, for example, in Asia is dominated by small land farmers. So precision agriculture has a couple of features in it. One is called drip irrigation, which makes sure that you basically being very, very sensitive amount on the water that is used. Now, to get drip irrigation, you need electricity because you're pumping water in a very regimented manner on a daily basis across your fields. Drip irrigation also requires, these pipes that are spread across the farms. So Indian farmers, unfortunately, most of the majority of them depend on the monsoons for all their water. Now, and so that's the reason there's a huge push by the government to promote irrigation, canals, so that farmers, even the most poorest farmers in the most driest areas of India, can get access to water throughout the year. Otherwise, these farmers are totally dependent on water only during the monsoons. So drip irrigation needs electricity. That's why this whole thing is very, very challenging for marginal small farmers. The richer farmers have irrigation, they have generators that give them electricity and then help pump the water in their pipes, in their drip irrigation systems. But the smaller farmers are struggling. And the solutions are, which has been they talked about for years and years and years, how do you consolidate land? How do you consolidate land and then use automation, tractors, drip irrigation, because it makes it capitally prudent. So that's what I think is the need of the hour.
Okay. So I want to look at one other aspect as well, which is hydroponics, as you mentioned earlier. So hydroponics may look like the future, but mostly for people who can afford that. And especially in the West, it makes sense because labor is expensive and land is limited. But because in India, labor is cheap and land is still accessible, hydroponics becomes more exclusive. So, do you see a pathway to make hydroponics more inclusive, or do you think this is inherently a high capital, high skill world?
Yes, no, good point raised. The problem with hydroponics is it is very capital intensive. Very, very few farmers in India will have that capital. Secondly, because for example, hydroponics is very, very pertinent for leafy greens, lettuces, kale, basil, your herbs, all your oreganos, thyme, rosemaries, tomatoes, peppers. But the realization in the market, the prices that are paid for these that are grown hydroponically, unfortunately in India is not high. They don't get a premium. So that is a very discouraging feature for anyone to put more hydroponic farms. So that's a fundamental issue that India is facing, number one, because the price realization is not coming through. You want more and more hydroponic farms, controlled agriculture farms, because they improve yield tremendously. Sometimes in the case of tomatoes and peppers, it could be as high as 50 times. It saves a lot of water. It avoids all contamination because these are not soil-based crops. They're all grown hydroponically, so they don't touch the soil. It is a need of the hour, both in terms of food safety, both in terms of health. Unfortunately, again, as I said, capital requirements are very high. So very, very small uptake, pickup in hydroponics and covered agriculture in India. But hopefully every 10 years, there'll be an improvement. And because of the huge shortage of water, this is going to take shape. But again, in agriculture, things move very slowly, very, very slowly.
Okay, so like what you're saying is it'll take time, but do you think that
Yes.
this like trickle down innovation is still realistic in hydroponics?
It is definitely in controlled agriculture. It is because simply put, water. India does not have, no country in the world if it has surplus water. There's a water shortage. So one has to move towards precision agriculture to ensure that there is the most efficient use of water.
So, one newer idea is drones and how they can bring real progress as well, especially better spraying, less pesticide, more real time crop data. But the shadow here is pretty clear too. The daily laborers lose work, most farmers can't read the data, and the bigger farms benefit most. So, how do we make sure that drones don't just turn into another rich farmer's tool that widens the gap?
Yeah, so I think the government is making promoting drone DVs where they're training a lot of the village women the art of using a drone. They are also trying to give them some capital so that they can train and buy some drones. This program has to be expanded not by just by the government but by large NGOs so that more and more village ladies in villages who are very, very important in countries like India, Southeast Asia, to manage the farms. It is important to get trained so that at the very least, the labor required to manage the drones is almost the cost is zero because it's all household labor. And once they're trained and they have some capital to buy the drone, it'll bring in that level of efficiency on the farms.
Okay, so, like extra maybe investment in training and especially in the villages and expanding these programs is very crucial to agriculture, like and drones in agriculture.
Correct. Very, very true.
Okay, so this interesting idea like mechanization is interesting because it solves one country's problem but creates another. So, like, kind of a contrast between the West is that machines are replacing expensive labor, and in India, machines are affordable only for medium farmers because small farmers take loans that they can't repay. So, do you think that there's a version of mechanization that works for both worlds?
Yeah, there could be, see, the large scale farms of the West. Let's not, because they have massive, very, very big investments in huge silos, storage, huge tractors, planes, etc. As far as India is concerned and some other poor countries, you can have smaller tools. Like I said, at the very least, they should have drip irrigation, so pipes that periodically give water to all the crops. That can be done. Secondly, small, not that expensive automation can be done, like simple rice harvesters that are not that capital intensive. So I think as labor gets more and more scarce, even in countries like India, though you can say, hey, India has a lot of labor, but the challenge in India is no labor wants to now work on the farms. So the second generation of farmers do not want to work on farms. They want to go to the cities. So India will inevitably is also facing a shortage. So they will have to figure out a way to either combine their lands, or unfortunately, in most cases, they also sell their lands and they get away from agriculture. But yes, India will have to find means of much cheaper automation. Like, drones are not that expensive, for example. Rice harvesters are not that expensive. So gradually, the poor farmers of India will also make sure that, they have some means, some automation, because otherwise, even their labor is going away.
Okay, yeah. And my final question is, as we discuss the current situation, especially the past versus today, as you mentioned, there are like fewer like farmers in this new generation. And agri influencers are huge now. Farmers are learning instantly and communities modernize faster. But some farmers without smartphones fall behind and misinformation spreads fast. So, how do you see this balance playing out?
In terms of the information that is available to some farmers and information that is not available to some farmers, that is only going to improve with bandwidth now available across the length and breadth of 4 countries, including India. You're hoping that there are village panchayats, local bodies that disseminate information, market prices, daily prices, and how farmers are made aware so that they're not at the mercy of middlemen. So I project that the information arbitrage that has existed will go away in the next 10 years, so that everyone will be privy to almost all the market information because of these smartphones. Or if everyone doesn't even have a smartphone, there'll be, panchayats, local bodies, block level areas in the villages, which will give you information, because there will be some sort of infrastructure of, computers or market systems that will be there in every possible village. That I think I'm fairly assured of.
Okay, thank you so much for joining me today, Deepak. Agriculture is one of those spaces where progress is real and necessary, but so are the shadows. And today made it clear that the future of food isn't just about technology, but more about dignity, access, equity, and making sure that millions of farmers don't get left behind while the industry moves forward. So, as always, on Shadows of Progress, we end with the same question: progress for who and who gets left behind? Thank you, Deepak.
Okay, thanks, Riya. Thank you.